Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Plug Into Tulane. Tonight, we're going to discuss the return to college sports. We have a very exciting panel. My name is Dr. Greg Stewart, School of Medicine, Department of Orthopedics, and co-director and co-founder of the Center for Sport. With me tonight is Troy Dannen, Director of Athletics. In the fall of 2020, Troy starts on his fifth full academic year as Tulane University's Ben Weiner Director of Athletics. Since being named Director of Athletics, Dannen has reinvigorated the Green Wave Athletics program with the hiring of 9 head coaches: football, men's basketball, baseball, beach volleyball, golf, sailing, swimming and diving, women's tennis, and volleyball, while also revamping the department's senior management team, increasing fundraising, and enhancing the student-athlete experience. Through his leadership, Dannen has elevated the profile of Tulane athletics from local, regional, and national standpoints. Over the past 4 years, Tulane athletics has seen 27 All-Americans, 74 All-American Athletic Conference recipients, 12 conference champions, and Green Wave teams have earned 21 trips to the postseason. Also with us tonight is Jay Cicero, President, CEO of Greater New Orleans Sports Foundation. Jay Cicero started at the Greater New Orleans Sports Foundation in 1990 and has served as the president and CEO since 1997. During his tenure, he served in numerous senior leadership roles, including as the executive director of the 2002, 2013, and 2024 New Orleans Super Bowl host committees, and the 2008, 2014, and 2017 NBA All-Star Game host committees, as well as serving on the executive committees of 4 NCAA men's Final Fours, 4 NCAA women's Final Fours, 19 New Orleans Bowls, 2 WrestleManias, and the College Football Championship game. Also tonight, Nina King, who is the Senior Deputy Director of Athletics for Administration, Legal Affairs, and Chief of Staff at Duke University. Nina joined Duke Athletics in September of 2008, where she facilitates daily operation and oversight of the athletic department, human resource operation, recreation and physical education program, and all legal matters, including the development and execution of department contracts, while serving as the liaison to the University Legal Counsel Office. She leads the Senior Staff and Sports Administrator Group, which is responsible for administration of Duke's 27 varsity sports, while assisting with oversight and planning for special projects within Duke Athletics and in collaboration with the university administration. She's currently Vice Chair of the NCAA Division I Women's Basketball Committee, and will serve as chair for the 2020-2021 season. She received her bachelor's degree in accountancy from the University of Notre Dame and her Juris Doctor degree from Tulane Law School. Also with us, Christy Thomaskutty, women's basketball analyst for ESPN and the SEC Network. She's worked as a women's basketball analyst for ESPN and the SEC Network since 2017. She began her coaching career as an assistant coach at the Division I level, 5 at Illinois State University and 1 at St. Louis University. She then served as head women's basketball coach at Emory University for 14 years. She played college basketball at Tulane. Thank goodness they don't have when you graduated, Christy, because I was there then, where she graduated magna cum laude, Bachelor of Science in Management from Tulane's A.B. Freeman School of Business, while leading her team to consecutive NCAA tournament bids. She later earned her master's degree, MBA, from Illinois State. Also with us tonight, Coach Ron Hunter, head coach of the men's basketball team at Tulane University. He was introduced as the head coach on March 26, 2019, and is the winningest coach ever hired to lead the Green Wave. In his 26 years as men's college basketball head coach, he's guided his teams to 457 wins. He's led his teams to the NCAA tournament in 3 of the last 6 seasons, while producing 20 or more wins in 6 of the last 9. He's also been voted Conference Coach of the Year by his peers 3 times. Additionally, he's produced 2 NBA first-round draft picks, including 11-year NBA veteran George Hill and his son, RJ. A servant to his community, he received the 2018 Gene Bartow Award for his outstanding achievement and contributions to the game of basketball. In working with his charity, Samaritan's Feet, he's provided more than 7 million shoes for children in need all over the world. So welcome to our panel. And at this point, I'd like to also introduce Gabe Feldman, the sports law guy from the Tulane University School of Law, and my co-founder and co-director of the Center for Sport. Gabe?
Thanks, Greg, and welcome everyone. It's good to see a lot of familiar names in the participant list, and it's also great to see all the panelists we have together. I've become good friends with many of them, and some are becoming new good friends, and we've got a great group. And what I'm going to do is kick things off with some questions directed towards each one of the panelists, but I'd love for the audience to ask questions through the chat function, and then I can throw some out there to the speakers as well. And feel free to ask them starting now in the chat room, and then we can go ahead and intersperse those throughout the evening. And I want to start with Greg, with Dr. Stewart. And for those of you who have been on webinars before with Greg and me, or have just heard us talk before, you'll know that we sort of act like third graders around each other. We make fun of each other and we call each other names. And it's because I think we admire and respect each other so much. At least that's why I do it. He may not, but that's why I do it. And I rarely take the time to say anything sincerely nice about him, but I'm going to take the time now to do it, because as everybody knows, we are in unprecedented and scary times, and the people who are helping us navigate these scary times are the doctors, and they're the ones we have to trust, and they're the ones who we're putting our hands in. We're putting our safety in their hands, and we're putting the safety of our children, of our students, of our family members in their hands. And there's nobody I trust more, and maybe this says more about me than Greg, but there's nobody I trust more than Dr. Stewart for this role. And he has spent his entire career focused on helping college athletes and looking after their safety, their health and welfare. And it's almost as if he's been preparing his whole career for this moment in time to be able to guide the coaches, guide the athletic department, and protect our athletes. So we are in good hands, and thank you, Greg, for all that you've done. And I've started breaking out in hives from being nice to you for about a full minute there. So, but let me ask you the first question. And, oh, and just one other point. He's been recognized for the service he's provided to Tulane, because he is one of the newest entrants into the Tulane Athletics Hall of Fame. And I think he's probably the first medical professional to be in the Tulane Athletics Hall of Fame. And it's a testament to what he's meant to Tulane and Tulane athletics. So with all of that said, Greg, can you give us an update on where things stand with Tulane athletics from the medical perspective, and where things stand from the conference perspective, given your role as the head of the American Athletic Conference Committee on COVID and COVID protocols, and just maybe contrast it, if you can, to what the other conferences who have decided to shut down are doing, and tell us how and why you're going to make sure that we're able to play football and the other sports safely this fall. No pressure.
Is that why you said nice things about me? Because you knew you were going to ask that kind of a question. So part of what we've been trying to do is create an environment that is safe for the student athletes primarily, and then for the coaches and staff and everyone else that will participate in the events. It starts with practice, and I'll tell you that, and not just because Troy is on the call, but with our director of athletics and our president have been incredibly supportive of what we've been trying to do and understand the importance of sport and competition and why so many people have come here. Having said that, we are doing and have been from the beginning probably some of the most aggressive testing in the country. Everyone else has kind of caught up to us now from an athletic standpoint, but you know, we've set the building up so that people can only come in one way. Coach Hunter is incredibly appreciative of the fact that I make him walk all the way past his office to come into Wilson in order to go in under the stadium back to his office. But that's how he gets in. There's one way in, so that they all have their temperatures taken. If it's their day to get swabbed and tested, they get tested. We've spent a lot of time and effort on some of the operational issues with regard to keeping people away from the student athletes when they're on the sideline, talking about masking, talking about social distancing. And while we talk about social distancing and football, it almost seems like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that we're going to stand 6 feet apart on the sideline and then hand people a football and they're all going to run into each other. But that's part of the testing protocols. We're testing 3 times a week. We'll test within 2 days of a game. We'll test in the middle of the week, and then we'll test again before we go to the hotel or travel on the plane, so that we are as certain as possible that everyone is negative. And that's all across the conference. I think some of the difference, especially with the Pac-12, is that they were really in a different area. Their footprint for their conference was in an area such that some of the schools weren't even being allowed to practice and certainly couldn't go indoors to practice. So they made decisions based on the environment and where people were located. And I think that's where some of the change is, even with the Big Ten at some level. And then the other conferences are all testing 3 times a week. The protocols are very similar, and doing everything we can to keep everyone safe.
So you guarantee it? Is that, I'm sorry, you broke out at the end there. I couldn't, if you do guarantee.
So, but I think on that is, I do think, you know, in that, you know, college athletics and college football is going to be closer to Major League Baseball than it is to the NBA, because there's not a true bubble. The student athletes, the general students are back on campus, and you're seeing spikes in cases in universities all across the country, some of which have actually pivoted and closed. So we're closer to Major League Baseball and liable to see some positives and maybe even some game postponements.
Okay, thanks, Greg. And let me shift over to Troy to talk about your experience from the AD chair and having to navigate the medical advice from folks like Greg and watching other conferences shut down and other conferences, and we'll get to one of those other conferences in a second with Nina, continue to move forward, and how you are making the decision and how much of the decision is on you versus the president versus the conference versus any other decision makers in the room.
Well, you know, one of the very first pages of the Constitution of the NCAA says all medical matters are not the control of the athletic director or the coach or the president. It's the team physician. So, you know, from that standpoint, I think, you know, we're wired to make sure that the right people are making the medical decisions. And, you know, not to steal from what you said earlier, but you know, Greg has been remarkable. I'm not sure institutionally how I could have led a department without having someone like Greg alongside, because it seems like every decision we make on every topic has a medical component to it now, maybe a component that we never ever considered before. So Greg and I probably maybe 5-10 times a day are talking now. So how do we integrate and make sure we're doing everything in a safe way, every action that we take? But at the league level, that we've all reinvented ourselves, reinvented what it is we do. Again, thinking of the health and safety has always been foremost in everything that we've done, but we've kind of had a model that we followed forever and ever, and we've reinvented that model. March 13th is the date that this all shut down and everybody left, and our first football game is August 12th. That's 1 day shy of 6 months. So in 6 months, we had to reinvent the wheel, if you will, how we did it. And so, with the docs and not just Greg, but the docs at every school in our league, we brought in outside cardiologists, outside epidemiologists to give us guidance and advice, similar to what the other leagues had. The leagues have not done a good job probably of sharing. I think some leagues have determined medical information was proprietary, and I don't think that's been a good outcome in this. But through Doc's leadership, we've been able to get medical folks together that are talking to all the leagues, and I think we're all on the same page going forward. I feel it's nice to be at Tulane because we have one of the best sports law programs in the country. We have one of the best sports medicine programs in the country, led by the two of you. I'm the Holiday Inn Express guy. I'm half lawyer by day, half doctor by night, and luckily I've got the two of you beside me because that's how this job has evolved in the last 6 months.
Thanks, Troy. I would say it's the best sports law program. I don't think I would say one of the best, but let's go to Nina. And Nina, in your role at Duke, and you're a lawyer, not a doctor, but you're like Troy, having to rely on the advice of medical personnel, and like here at Tulane, the head of the ACC's COVID committee is a Duke professor, a doctor at Duke. And I want to ask you first about the COVID response and moving forward with fall sports as, again, other conferences are or have shut down. And then also your neighbor down the road that we like to, as I'm a Duke alum, we like to make fun of UNC when we can. But UNC dealing obviously with a very serious issue where they had an outbreak among their student body, and they've shut down their in-person classes, so they've gone almost entirely remote, but they're continuing to go on with football. And I'm curious if those discussions have come up on Duke's campus, and whether what happened at UNC has changed the equation at all in terms of the football season proceeding.
Sure. Well, similar to Troy, I think the first thing for all of us to do is admit we're not doctors, and we're going to listen to the doctor's advice. We're not making the decisions without the doctors at the table, without all of the information possible that we could get. So our medical advisory person that chairs the ACC medical advisory group has been so helpful, and really we've relied on him every step of the way, along with our operations folks within athletics. So it's been great collaboration here on campus. And, we also had an opportunity to partner with student affairs folks on campus and the folks that are on the ground bringing the students, the non-student athletes, back to campus. And so it really has been a collaborative approach in how do we do this in the safest way possible, because our student athletes are students. And so, we're trying to kind of create the Duke bubble here for all of the roughly 3,000 students that are on campus. Campus just brought back freshmen and sophomores for this semester. So kind of creating the Duke bubble, if you will, and protecting all of our students. Of course, we've been watching what's going on down the street at both State and Carolina, not picking weeds in anyone else's garden. And I know that it's been a tough go for both of those institutions. They both have had outbreaks that have been publicized, I think we've handled the testing a little bit differently, and we've been fortunate, and our students have really been paying attention to all of the mitigation protocols that we've been put in place, and knock on wood, we haven't had any issues here at Duke. So, but we're in constant communication with those folks as well. I mean, we all are in the same area, and local government regulations apply to all of us the same way. And so we're talking to our colleagues at those other institutions as well.
Thanks, Nina. Let's go to Jay. And Jay, I think for the folks who don't necessarily know what you do, what your organization does, if you could talk about it in the context of the women's Final Four, and Nina was obviously very much involved in that, and she can chime in on that as well. But the cancellation of the women's Final Four, and how that decision was made, and the impact it had on the city, on your job, and what it means for potential future Final Fours, and just what it means for your business.
Well, thank you, Gabe. Sports Foundation is about 32 years old now. Our mission is to bid upon and manage sporting events in the city that bring economic impact, media exposure, and business in general to the city. Some of them range from smaller events up to the Super Bowl. And so we are in charge of not only bidding upon, but we manage these events. So it's our job to go fundraise on behalf of the events, to pay for all the expenses that we commit to in a bid, as well as to operationally execute every aspect of a bid. And so you asked about the women's Final Four cancellation, and Nina and her group, we work very closely with our staff and the staff at Tulane and UNO and the Sugar Bowl as co-hosts for the women's Final Four. It would have been our fourth women's Final Four here in New Orleans, which would have been a record. So Nina, you can take back that we hope to get that record sometime soon, although you guys are bid out pretty far out now. But the cancellation of the event, which was on the NCAA, it really wasn't something that was a local decision at the time. I think cost the city about $50 million, for city and state about a $50 million economic impact, plus all the media exposure associated with it through the live broadcasts on ESPN, the coaches convention, the fans, family, traveling, all the support groups, the sponsors that love to come to New Orleans. So it was a blow. There's no doubt, and it was the right thing to do, obviously. But it was a difficult time, and it happened so quickly. We were really monitoring the situation, and one day, I think on the 12th of March, we were all go, and on the 13th of March, we were shut down, and it was just an incredible time period to really be flexible and not knowing what to do as far as events are concerned, as far as what are we planning for. We've been planning a year and a half for that event. What are we going to execute? What are we not going to execute? Trying to take into account that the event could be canceled. Unfortunately, cancellation insurance for the NCAA, and we didn't have any for the host committee, did not recoup our expenses that were involved with it. So that's something we're looking into for the men's Final Four, which we have for 2022, and obviously for the Super Bowl in 2024. But on a business level, we host and manage events, and that's what we do. And we partner with Tulane. We partner with the Saints and the Pelicans, and we partner with other groups around the city to execute everything associated with these with these bids and with the events. So kind of the glue in the middle that is involved in every one of these events that makes that happen. But the cancellation of that event was a blow. I can't lie to you. Understandable that it happened, but it was a shock to us all, and we had hoped to execute everything that we've been planning, and hopefully put ourselves back on the map for hosting a fifth women's Final Four sometime in the future. So hopefully we'll get that fourth. Nina, maybe you can help us out a little bit there with that. But it was an interesting time. I think all of our staffs together were really prepared to pull off, and that we had 600 or 700 volunteers lined up to really work all the events. But it has grown. That event has grown tremendously since we last hosted it in 2013. So we were really looking forward to executing everything associated with it.
Thanks, Jay. And it sounds like, I've been taking notes, but it sounds like Dr. Stewart has guaranteed that we'll have a safe football season, and that Nina has guaranteed that the women's Final Four will come back to New Orleans in 2025. So
this webinar is all about guarantees. That's right.
It's been a productive call already. Okay, speaking of the uncertainty and the on and off and not knowing what's going on and reacting to news that is unfolding every minute, many of us were probably watching or turned on the NBA game the night it was canceled, and had to listen to the announcers react to this world-changing unfolding of events. And it reminded me of the old days when something major would happen and everybody's watching the same broadcast, and the news broadcaster is having to deal with these things live and internalize it and be calm and try to explain what's going on to this country while they're probably panicking internally, but they don't want to show the panic. And so, Christy, you are in the middle of all of this. You are scheduled to announce multiple games that are going to be broadcast on ESPN. And as I understand it, you're on a plane with your phone off while the news is breaking that the games you're going to cover may be canceled. So can you talk a little bit about how you handle that as an announcer, and particularly given all of the sort of with the NBA, they got to control everything. When the NBA shut down, the NBA shut down. In college, some conferences were shutting down, others were going forward. There were tournaments that were being held while others were being shut down. And you were announcing multiple ones of those. So can you talk a little bit about how you got that information, and then how you were preparing to talk about it on air, as you're also, again, trying to figure out what it means for you and your safety and flying and being in an arena? Oh, you're on mute, so let me, there we go.
Troy mentioned earlier, the last time he was at a sporting event was with me at the American Conference Championship. And I called that championship on Monday night, flying home early on Tuesday, and that's when the Ivy League canceled their tournament. And I was scheduled to land and pretty much hop on another flight to head to Boston to call that championship. And so with that announcement, I'm like probably everyone else in the country. I'm glued to my phone and Twitter to get every live update, watching SEC Network, ACC Network, because they're in the midst of their conference tournaments at the time. And I remember going to bed that night after the NBA canceled, and this is obviously before the NCAA canceled the tournament, but just in that moment, I was like, if the NBA can't do it, there's no way we can expose our student athletes to this, what might be or what might not be. And so I was a fan probably as much as anyone was during those couple of days, just waiting for that information to come out, because like even my boss didn't know. I mean, from an ESPN perspective, we're waiting for the NCAA to tell us, is there going to be a tournament or not? And so you just kind of saw, unfortunately, the dominoes fall and all sports get canceled. And
what are the discussions, and then I'm going to go to coach in a second, your coach as well, if you're both coaches, but what have been the discussions in terms of the upcoming season from the ESPN, from the broadcaster perspective?
Well, I think in terms of the way we've always done sports, it's going to be a thing in the past, at least in the foreseeable future. I think what you've seen a lot with the Korean Baseball League is what you're probably going to see, except for those A-team announcing, the Herb Street or the Rebecca Lobo crews who may be able to go on site and call a game. For the rest of us, I think I speak for the majority of my ESPN colleagues across all sports, we're now going to be calling games from our homes, or we're going to go and do a Remy. I live in Charlotte. I can go to the office here and call games from there. But going to schools is a thing in the past, at least for the foreseeable future, until there's a vaccine. You won't be seeing myself and my colleagues come on campus to call games. Games will still get called. And I think that's one of the things through all of these challenges, we've seen the growth of innovation. I mean, I had never heard of Zoom before March, and now it's a daily occurrence. And so I will be sitting where I am now with a number of monitors and calling games. And that's where we're at now. I mean, the good news is there will be games to call. The bad news is, from my perspective, I love being courtside. I love having that experience with the athletes, with the coaches. But hey, I just want athletics to come back. I'll call a game in any capacity right now.
Yeah, thank you, Christy. All right, so Coach Hunter, and the reason I did it in this order is because it's tough to follow the professional broadcaster and Coach Hunter, so I wanted them to go at the end. But Coach, the conversation understandably has been primarily about the return of college football, and given that it's set to start next week, or it actually has started in other conferences, and it is a contact sport more so than basketball. But the basketball conversation, obviously for you, has already begun, and you've been talking about it for a while. And I think the rest of the country will start talking about it soon. And this ties into a couple of the questions that were asked in the comments. But can you tell us a little bit about how you're preparing for the season and what you think that season is going to look like, and the way that you're running practices, and just how everything is different now than it was this time last year?
Well, it is different, especially, with just basically taking over a program and trying to get it going. You guys keep talking about that March 12th. I remember sitting in the hotel. We were going to play UConn at 1 o'clock. And man, I had the best pregame speech ready to go. And I thought this was going to get us to win this game. And I was fired up. And next thing you know, I get a call from my athletic director, Troy, telling me that, hey, you may want to come downstairs. I don't think we're going to play. And so I still haven't used that speech yet. I tried to use it on my wife, but she wasn't going for it. So that's the last time I was with that team. And 3 hours later, we're on a plane back to New Orleans. And, fast forward to now where we are now, and still the uncertainty of knowing when we're going to play again. It's tough. I've been coaching for over 30 years, and nothing can kind of prepare you for this because every day your student athletes will say, hey, coach, we're going to play. Generally they know these are the time frame, here's what we're going to do. And all those things were thrown out from the recruiting aspect of it. There half the guys that we brought in, I didn't even go out to recruit because we didn't get a chance to see them because of COVID. And so all this is really different for a lot of us. But again, I think the most important part of it is that we look at the positive side, and we talked at Tulane especially about, just win the day and be the best team in the pandemic. We keep talking about win the pandemic. We met today with our guys and we practiced, and we just wanted to be really good today, win the pandemic, and whenever we play, we'll be ready. And so we have to just take it daily. I've been, for the most part, you talk about seasons, and one of the things that we just worry about is let's just worry about today. And if you focus on the day, then you don't have to worry about when we're going to play and some of the other issues that come along with that. Because I tell you, with all the things that are going on in our world right now, from the pandemic to social injustice, if you start to think about tomorrow, next week, and next month, you won't get anything accomplished. And so we're just focused on the day, and I think that's what you have to do. But by no means is this easy for the coaches or the student athletes. I think it's very difficult for our student athletes. And I play college basketball. I have no idea how our young people are doing this. Worried about getting tested 3 times a week, walking through different ways, and not being able to take official visits, not being able to go home and really see their parents. We keep them in this bubble, and some kids, they're 2 or 3 hours away, and they want to go home for Labor Day and see mom and dad, and really can't do it. And so it's really, really tough for our student athletes, and I feel for them, but it's just the times that we live in right now.
Thanks, Coach. Let me throw this out there to whoever wants to jump in on this, because at least a few of you probably have some thoughts on this. And this is in response to Regine's question. Larry and a couple of others have asked about the overall impact on the economics of athletic departments and of institutions and the NCAA. And we've already seen with Stanford and Iowa cuts to Olympic sports. And and we've seen an opportunity for every institution in the country, whether it's college athletics or not, to reevaluate how they spend money and where they prioritize things and how they prioritize them. What is the lasting impact do you think this will have on college sports? And I know it's part of that might depend on whether we have a college basketball tournament in March and whether we have a full football season in the fall. But based on what we know now, and I'll ask for predictions later, but what do you think is the longer term impact in terms of the economics of college sports and at your particular institutions, or just the structure of the NCAA going forward?
I'll start with a word. I think it's been revealed that our model is not sustainable. And, you know, this is not just an athletics question, it's a higher ed question. You know, people like to look at athletic spending and say this budget's that much and that budget's that much, but it is a small sliver in most places of an entire institution's budget. A lot of public institutions rely upon state funding, and we know what's happened to tax revenues during the pandemic. So I think the whole financial model of higher ed is going to change and has to change and has to evolve if it is going to be sustained. And then you take that to the athletics piece in particular. And Gabe, you said it right. We do have to reprioritize how we spend. There's been a lot of push and a lot of changes in the last 5 to 10 years of emphasis on money spent to specifically impact the interests of the student athlete. Whether it's, you know, we now are going to have 3 mental health coordinators. When I came to Tulane, we had 0. We've opened a training, just the resource for students. We're going to have to continue to spend that way. But there are other places maybe that you would say excesses are not going to be sustainable anymore. I think another piece is you look at, we have a lot of places running on $150 million budgets with $3 million in reserves. And you know, in some ways, this is a business within the educational enterprise. No business in their right mind would ever operate with that type of a financial model. So we have to, if we're going to have spend the magnitude we spend, we have to start running parts of this more like a business than we've run it in the past. I don't know how quickly you'll see some of this happen. A lot of coaching contracts where a lot of our big expenses are 5-6 years, and you know, some of those costs are tied for quite a while. People have reduced sports, but frankly, reducing Olympic sports in a $100 million loss situation to save $5 million doesn't get you very far. Where I think, and I know I continue to ramble here, but for a lot of schools, the only way to fix the problem right now is going to be to take on additional debt. Schools have taken on a lot of debt to build out infrastructure. They're going to take additional debt on, and the price of that debt's going to be paid for years and years and years going forward. So, you know, even if revenues grow, and we hope fans come back in the stands. This is the first time we've ever given fans a real reason not to come. We better hope they come back. We better hope they continue to give. And we better hope revenues continue to grow, because we're going to take on more debt to pay off the price of maybe the management practices we've had of old.
Nina, any thoughts from Duke's perspective?
You know, I think Troy put it really well. I will say, in terms of cutting sports, we have seen an alarming number of schools cut sports here in the past 6 months. I think I read something over 100 teams have been cut. And that's never easy. Those decisions are really difficult, impact a lot of lives, student athletes, coaches, staff. And it's hardly they hardly stick. I mean, in the past few years, we've seen where schools have cut sports, and then there's fundraising drives and alumni outcry to bring them back. And in a lot of cases, they do come back. So I think those are really last resort decisions. We are seeing it happen. I also think an unintended consequence of cutting a lot of the Olympic sports is the impact it has on the Olympic movement in our country. A lot of our Team USA athletes come from the college atmosphere, where they've competed as collegiate student athletes. And so, you know, where our institutions provide broad-based sport programming, at Duke we have 27 sports, you know, it's really going to impact, again, Team USA and the Olympic movement. So cutting sports is a scary thought.
One other piece to this too, Gabe, I want to add is only 1/3 of the Division I schools play FBS football. And the other 2/3 rely on basically the revenue generated from the NCAA and the men's Final Four and the men's championship. Last year, that was a $750 million loss to the organization. The NCAA's trying to recoup that. I think there was an announcement today that every employee at the NCAA will be furloughed for a period of a month or two, you know, to try to offset that expense. You know, looking forward, if the Final Four were not to occur, and if there would be a similar hit, there are 20 leagues that I don't know how they will operate going forward, because they're so reliant on that money. That the money from the NCAA tournament takes care of all the league office operations. There's no television revenue, there's no media revenue, there's no multimedia revenue. The source of revenue for a lot of those schools is whatever is left over from the NCAA units, and that's very, very important to the whole of the organization. So we are focusing on football, but I think we can all rest assured that every last effort is going to be made to make sure that Final Four happens this year, because it's necessary for the survival of Division I athletics as a whole.
But Jay, on that note, New Orleans has acquired or earned the reputation and honor of being able to very quickly take a major event and host it. And I'm thinking of the NBA All-Star Game and how we were able to, or you were able to, I shouldn't say, I don't get credit. You get credit for being able to move it from North Carolina to New Orleans on remarkably short notice. And as we are getting closer to college basketball season, there's talk, and this is one of the questions mentions this in the chat, but the possibility of a bubble for college basketball or mini tournaments. And it looks like there may be a need to have regional sites set up where you can host 8, 12, 16, whatever number of schools might be, whether it's over winter break or some other point. Are you now thinking about how to present the arena or the dome or both as venues for that? And then more broadly, are you now including COVID protocols as part of the pitch? I mean, we hope that this will just be a 1-year thing, but in the event that we're still dealing with this 2-3 years down the road, is it now we have one-way exits and entryways, and we can space people out as they're waiting to get into the facility? Is that part of what you're working on, or are you just saying we've got to hope that the business as usual returns in a year or two?
Now, I'll start with the last question first. I think that the national governing bodies of the owners of these events are definitely looking for a plan and some assurance that all health and safety, especially for the athletes, whether or not there's fans attending or not, it's not sure, but athletes and the folks that support the athletes or student athletes is being thought of, and so we're beholden to these national governing bodies. Getting the NBA All-Star Game for 2017 and a quick turnaround was a big feather in the cap of New Orleans and Louisiana to be able to turn that around so quickly. This summer, or earlier this summer, we actually did place a I wouldn't say it's a bid, but we had numerous conversations with the NBA about hosting their bubble in New Orleans and had a great plan put forth. So, you know, we know we can do something very quickly and have that plan that from the NBA that's either whittled down for a smaller event or can be ramped up depending on the number of teams and the amount of time they're here. But that event would have been 100 at the time. If it were all 30 teams, it would have been 100 days, approximately 1,000 room nights per night for 100 days. So it's 100,000 room nights in the area. That's, you know, just below a Super Bowl as far as the number of room nights associated with it. It's not Super Bowl rates, but we would have used two facilities, broadcast facilities. One would have been the Smoothie King Center, of course. The other would have been built out in the convention center, and the convention center would have held 8 sets of 2 practice courts, along with weight rooms and training facilities to go along with it. So we were going to use the Hyatt and the Smoothie King Center as one campus, and the Hilton Riverside and the Convention Center as the other campus, and you know, work out the transportation and everything associated with it. The NBA being so familiar with New Orleans, and the NBA All-Star staff for the NBA is the same group that is put together the bubble, responsible for the bubble that is now in Orlando. So, you know, when you have those types of relationships and you've built that trust over the years, it's a lot easier to make a call and they understand that, you know, you're going to take care of them and think about their needs, the athletes' needs, and the needs of the media and everyone else. So we were in those conversations, and we could easily, you know, dust that plan off and adjust it for the NCAA or others. And you know, just today we were talking about that same very subject. And so, you know, we will be exploring every opportunity possible to bring events to New Orleans. But yes, they have to be, the safety is first and foremost, and they have to know that we're going to work closely with them on whatever protocols they may have, depending on what the logistics are and who will be here for those events.
Thanks, Jay. And let me do a slight detour briefly away from medical issues, and then I'll come back to them with Greg. But I always like to think if there's something really bad going on, then that's the only bad thing going on. But unfortunately, that's not the way the world works. And in the middle of the pandemic, we've had obviously these significant racial justice issues and social justice issues. And we have seen athletes at all levels use their voice, use their platform to address these issues. And there's been obviously a lot of talk about what happened in the NBA, but there's also been a lot of discussion at the college level. And we've seen athletes coming together to ask for a lot of different things recently, and whether it's the Pac-12 or the Big Ten or any number of groups of players, and putting aside the health and safety issues that they're asking about, which we'll get back to with Greg in a second. But I want to start with Christy on this. And Christy, if you could fast forward, and then I'll ask Ron, you to chime in on this as well, to put your player hat on when you were playing. If you were playing today, what you would be thinking about in terms of the social justice issues and how you might use your platform today, and the pressures that are put on college athletes that, 1, they're young, 2, they're impressionable, 3, they're getting advice from lots of different people, 4, they have short careers, 5, they want to turn pro, most of them, and 6, they're worried about being criticized for making statements. So accepting that some of those exist for most athletes, young athletes, how would you handle it today, Christy, if you were a player, in terms of speaking up about social justice issues?
Well, I think first and foremost, these student athletes are speaking up because it's more about their lives, their livelihood, their family, their friends. And so, that's what's so great about our country, is that you have a voice. And I think it's wonderful to see these student athletes using this voice to further this cause, to further this movement. I think it's wonderful, because what it's doing in my mind, and again, I'm just here in Charlotte, but I'm reading from everywhere, is it's making everyone think. And that is always a great theme, because when you start to think, when you start to question how you act, only good can come from that. And so what I would do, I mean, again, we didn't have social media. We didn't have any of these things when we go back 26, 27 years ago. But for me, it would be to ask questions I'd start with my teammates. I'd start with my coaches, to ask those questions, to get the different perspectives. And that's why I believe in sport. I always have. It crosses socioeconomic, it crosses religion, it crosses obviously ethnicities, because the common goal is to play and to win. Well, the only way to do that, and Coach Hunter can speak to this piece, is that you got to know your teammates, and not just where you want to deliver the ball, but what really motivates this individual. What has their background been like? Why do they respond the way they do? And that's why I do think there's some great things to come. We have a long way to go, obviously, in this country, as we're seeing it throughout. But I do think the number one thing is to ask those questions of one another and not to assume.
Thanks, Christy. And Coach Hunter, both from your perspective as a player, but also now as a coach dealing with players who are dealing with these issues every minute. So I'd love to hear both of your perspectives on that.
Yeah, as I said before, these are unique times that we're in. And I had a conversation the other day with George Hill, who played for me. And I was so proud of how George Hill used his voice in the bowl. And and again, as his former coach, as I told him, probably more proud of him during that than anything he's done with basketball. Because part of the problem is that I've been around for so long that this has worn me out. I've been tired of talking about the same thing. I was born in 1964. And to hear we're having the same issues that we had in 64, 68, 74, 88. And so, but what's getting me through this is our student athletes and and the road that they're taking. And Christy just kind of talked about the initiatives that they've taken. And I'm not sure as a student athlete that I would have been able to do this, because again, with the social media and all the things that they have to deal with. But I have told my players, I've told my former players, I've told my son, I think it's important that we educate ourselves through this. I think it's really important, because there's one thing to protest. There's one team that have an opinion about it, but make sure that you educate yourself. And I think part of my job as a coach or a coach that's been through some things is that to help them through this. A few years ago, I had my team sit down and talk to John Lewis, and had John Lewis explain to them what this movement is really about. In 2 weeks, I'm having Ambassador Young from Atlanta talk to our young people about what this is really about. So part of what I'm supposed to do on my platform is to make sure that my 18, 19, and 20-year-olds understand what a lot of people had gone through. Because there's a lot of people out there protesting and not even understanding what Juneteenth meant, or not even knowing who John Lewis is. And so it's important that we educate ourselves and know exactly what we're doing in this regards. And so I've been proud of our kids for doing that. But again, as a coach, I think, and as a Black man, to be honest with you, I think it's important for me to educate the young people to make sure that they understand that the things that we had to go through before, that their children won't have to do this in about 20 years. That we can say we won't have to worry about the police brutality and some of the racism and some of the things that are going on.
Thanks, Coach. And that's really well said. And as a professor and educator, we like to think of these times as teaching moments, try to turn everything into a teaching moment. I feel like we have enough teaching moments for a while now. We can start getting things back to normal. And but I'm glad to hear that perspective. And so let me in the last few minutes here go back to Greg. And there were a couple of questions in the chat that I want to ask, and one is specifically about myocarditis, and it seemed as if it very quickly became the number one concern, or it became a bigger concern with the Big Ten's decision. And if you can talk a little bit about the issues with myocarditis and any other of the potential, I don't know if you would call them side effects or complications that would occur. And my understanding, which is very limited in this area, is that myocarditis is not a new issue. We've known about this as a complication for a long time. And maybe that was the reason the Big Ten canceled, maybe it wasn't. But talk about that a little bit. And then also, as one of the chat question asks, two of the Tulane's opponents are out of conference. So this is Joseph Shorter's question. And how do you handle playing opponents who may not be following the same protocols as our conference?
I'll start with that one because it's easier. They have to follow our protocols. That's the understanding. We share the protocols with them. Even this Friday morning with Memphis and SMU playing on Saturday, the medical advisory group will get together on a phone call and look at what's going on in the communities, at the schools, on the teams, and everything else to kind of do a go or no go on the game. So we're expecting other conferences to live up to our expectations. As if we were going to other conferences, if those were more strict, we would be expected to live up to that. The myocarditis was very interesting. You know, the coronavirus, COVID-19, is not the only virus that causes myocarditis, which is inflammation of the muscle of the heart. And what we've known this from other viruses. It is a potential complication. We've known it for a long time. The first papers for COVID-19, as you were saying earlier, we shut down in March. We're coming out at the end of April talking about myocarditis as a complication. And in May, there were actually beginning to be protocols with regard to how do we return athletes back to participation. So we had it written into our protocols. We'd been dealing with it and knew it was a potential complication for a long time. And then all of a sudden, like you said, it kind of blew up in the media and kind of became its own thing. It's kind of died down. It's not very common. But anybody who tests positive for the virus is going to go through a special protocol before they're allowed to return to participation. So we did blood work at the very beginning when everyone was coming back, even before they were sick. So we have some baseline on some different areas, including some of the enzymes that look at heart muscle damage. So we repeat those after they come out. So you're in quarantine. So if you get the virus and you're positive, at least 10 days, you're going to be isolated. At the end of that time, you have to have at least 24 to 48 hours with no symptoms before you're allowed out. Once you're allowed out, you're going to come back. We're going to redo the blood work. We're going to do electrocardiogram. We're going to do an echocardiogram. So we're going to look at the electrical activity of the heart and look at how the heart actually functions. If any of that is abnormal, then we'll go to the cardiac MRI and then return to play with that. If they have myocarditis, generally, and with other viruses, they sit for about 6 months. And then you retest them, and by then they're generally fine. So, you know, one of the things that we've noticed with this is that a lot of people potentially have myocarditis and are never evaluated for it. And even in the Big Ten, the reason they knew those student athletes had myocarditis was because they were student athletes and returning to participation, and these protocols were in place. So I'm sure there's a lot of people who have developed myocarditis and may never realize that they had it.
Okay, thanks, Greg. And we've got, I think, a minute left. So 20 seconds each. Everybody's crystal ball has been shattered and thrown into the sea, so I don't expect any certainty in these predictions, but best guess of what happens in college sports in the next year? You've got 20 seconds each, starting with Troy.
Of course, starting with Troy.
You've already used 5 seconds.
We just met with all of our student athletes. We told them this is normal. The normal that you left March 13th is not going to reappear anytime soon. So get used to the world in which we're living. We're going to wear a mask. We're going to be tested. We're going to do a lot of things that don't seem normal. Find a way to adapt and adjust and thrive through it, because that's what's facing us ahead in the foreseeable future.
Thanks. Nina?
Stay flexible and nimble. I don't think, as Troy said, this year is not going to look like anything we've ever experienced before. I think we'll have shortened seasons for a lot of sports, and creativity. We'll see a lot of creativity.
Christy?
I think the way sports were played and the way we called sports is a thing of the past, and it is a matter of be flexible, but most importantly, be safe, but compete. I mean, I think for an athlete, once they step between on the court, on the field, or whatever, it's still going to be the same game. Once they step off, it's going to be very different.
Jay?
I think flexibility is the key. Finding a way to get it done. And I think I admire Coach Hunter and other coaches and their jobs that they have to do now and all the extra responsibility that they have to be able to bring these kids to a point where they can actually compete. And I think if the kids and the athletes, the pro athletes and the college athletes, if they pay attention and they try and do the right thing, I think we've got a shot at making these seasons happen. But you're right, they may be shortened seasons, they may be abbreviated seasons, but getting through a season, I think, would be very important for all of us.
Thanks, Jay. Greg?
I think that always keeping health and safety at the forefront, but I think sport's too important to not have. The competition, the things that we learned from sport and teamwork. So I think there's, as you see, everyone's going to try and we're going to find a way to be able to compete.
Thanks, Greg. And Coach, to finish us off, and I hope your answer includes both that we will have a basketball season and that Tulane will be in the tournament. So go ahead. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Coach.
Which is the best way to answer that question?
Yes, we will be in a tournament. Yes, it will have a basketball season, but more importantly, the glasses have full. When you wake up every morning, we've got to start thinking positive about what's going to happen in our lives. Again, that you woke up in the morning, we're all blessed in that way. Let's not focus on the negative, focus on the positive, whether it's our social injustice, whether it's COVID, but we control that. We control our attitudes. And so let's make sure we stay on a positive tilt with everything that we do.
Thank you, Coach. Perfect note to end on. And thank you to all the panelists. I'm going to turn it over to Greg for some closing comments, but thank you all. This was great.
So I guess that means I've got to say something nice about you, Gabe. I want to also thank all of the panelists. This has been very insightful. I'm in the Zoom calls all day trying to figure out a way to play. So it's good to hear everybody else's perspective on all of this. And Gabe, you, as always, great job of moderating. And as much as I hate to say you're a friend, it's good to have you as a good friend. And again, thanks to everybody for joining us this evening. And we look forward to seeing everyone again in the near future. So thanks for attending. And roll wave.